Hello and good afternoon. My name is Brian Lewis. Welcome to the Spin Zone. And of course, it's been quite a few years since I've done this rendition, but I'm just going to start popping up doing videos again on certain topics. The first thing I wanted to cover, of course, was the big news. As a sports media guy, as someone that went to school for journalism, I feel like I wanted to hit this Woj topic first. Adrian Wojnarowski, I remember when I was in middle school, Yahoo Sports was like the big first, like, going. Bleacher Report in the very infant stage. I remember the infant stage of Bleacher Report, like 2005, 6, 7. But Woj was part of Yahoo. Dan Wetzel was college basketball. Jeff Passan, we're going to mention his name in a second, he was the baseball guy. Shams joined later on, because Shams is like my age. He's like 30 or 31, so like he obviously couldn't have been there in 2008. He must have been in high school in 2008. But pretty much, like, I tell you, man, and I say this, Woj was making whatever he was making, and he left ESPN. So that's one thing. ESPN, I think, is one of those things where Disney's one of those companies where it's like, it just seems like they don't prioritize. But in essence, it's not that. I think people are just looking at it from a standpoint where they have new leadership. They're looking at it from a new direction, and they see the world as a streaming world. Now, Woj, obviously, in my opinion, his best skill was as a writer. A lot of ESPN's prior talents were great as writers. Lebatard, Bomani, even though I didn't like those guys, I thought they were smug. At times with their opinion, and I thought they were a little too opinionated for to work for a company that only cares about selling ads and click ratings. I think they went too hard, too Boston wannabe. Like, it almost seemed like they were trying to be Dennis and Callahan, Jones and Lebatard, that is. And of course, Lebatard's still trying to be the John Dennis of whatever the fuck he's trying to do now. But all of that talent that ESPN had, you're talking about Bill Simmons, you're talking about Zach Lowe got let go this week too. Zach Lowe is part of that whole Grantland crew there that was at ESPN for a long time. And keep in mind, like, that was quality journalism. You know, even Jamel Hill, Michael Smith, I remember going back to the Globe, back when I was a kid working at the Boston Globe. Like, ESPN was the pinnacle of sports journalism. Now it's almost as if, like, you're almost better off on your own now and trying to do the way that, like, Pat McAfee did. And even Pat McAfee joined the ESPN. It's part of another part of this rendition. But, like, if Woj leaving ESPN to be the St. Bonaventure GM tells you that maybe he got burnt out, that's probably a hard job. That's like a every day, 24/7, like, you got to be living on your phone. Imagine that. Like, people are crazy. Like, you know, if you're an information junkie, it's probably great, but you get burnt out pretty quickly. I can imagine that. But the thing was, with Woj leaving, who's going to replace him? Now, Jeff Passan, who I mentioned a couple of minutes ago here, could be one of the names to replace him. However, and I say this, however, Shams could be a name, but I don't think, if ESPN's not trying to spend a lot of money, it's going to come down to whoever gives them the fairest contract to who they value. Because they're going to overpay some of the guys that they have now. It seems like they're going to build the whole network around, like, Pat McAfee and Stephen A. Smith, which is like, I know as a viewer, I'm not interested in that. I kind of want more of, how can I leave ESPN on as background noise? I like it the old way. But again, like, it's not that way anymore. Like, hasn't been quite that way in a long time. And it's crazy because, like, I feel like you get more information from independent sports podcasts than you do from these mainstream outlets, with the exception of maybe, like, CBS Sports. But even then, like, CBS Sports, you're almost like having to watch these, like, super long YouTube videos, so they don't really have a format. They don't have these, like, shortened clips, so, like, a lot of people just don't want to listen to a whole show. and again, this is like more of an opinion point, and Bill Simmons talked about it on The Ringer on one of his videos this week, and I remember sharing it. And I said exactly this. These companies, especially ESPN, if you look at their NBA coverage, they decided that they would rather have like a Kendrick Perkins, who the producers can kind of get to do the show their way. And keep in mind, like on TV, these producers are the ones that make the show. Like the guys on the air are the talent, for sure. But these producers behind the screen are the ones that are basically being told by the salespeople that, hey, these are the kind of things we need in order to get. We need to do it just like that. And there might be an angle that way. And keep in mind, like, it's a sales industry. You know, these guys on air are salesmen. They have to sell ads for the network. And that goes for anybody. Any independent podcaster is trying to sell something to you. Especially if they're sponsored by something. Because now they get an incentive if you buy the product. Now, mostly everybody's very upfront about that. However, I think the corporations tend to forget that. Like, you know, they have to be... It's tough to be fair and impartial when you're also getting payments from the company you're writing crap about, you know, at the same time. I think that's an element there. If they decide to not use, I should say, if they decide to replace Adrian Wojnarowski with someone like Jeff Passan or Adam Schefter from another sport, it's going to look, I think it's kind of a bad look on ESPN. Like, I think the direction ESPN should go, if I were running a network, would be to have a collection of local beat writers. Grab the best beat writers in the country, maybe like the best six to eight guys, and just throw them on with two hosts, right? And you can kind of figure it out from there, and I think you would get a better program. However, because of these former athletes, and you're starting to see it in football too, because of the criticism with Tom Brady, I don't think these former athletes, and I say this as someone who, again, I played sports in high school, been a fan my whole life, been a podcaster, blogger for the NFL draft for years. I wouldn't just, diminish people for nothing. However, I don't think these athletes, I think 95% of them make shitty broadcasters and make shitty analysts and make shitty journalists, because quite frankly, it's just like they're not journalists. They're not seasoned to understand the angle of what they're trying to perceive. Basically, I think a lot of people are just like, hey, they're telling me to say this, and a lot of people they're being sold as, well, how is it any different than being coached and then going on the field and making a play? And I go, but it's not. It's not. It's there's more to it than that. There's the way you speak, there's the way you write about it, there's the way you perceive it, there's the cultivation part of it, there's what you're trying to convey, there's the inner meanings, there's a lot of things that can go into anything you say. That's the world we live in now. And I think, no offense to Kendrick Perkins, but like, if he didn't play in the NBA, would he ever sniff a job like that? No. But again, too, this is kind of the double-edged sword, and I know what I'm going to say is going to come off as sour grapes, but like, professional sports taking their jobs, but in essence, how many of these journalists got the jobs because of their products of nepotism? Now, I'm not going to name the names, but there are plenty of guys in the space, especially in the play-by-play world, that only have their jobs because of their last name. Now, they could be talented, but if it wasn't for their last name, they wouldn't give a fucking chance, because I knew there were plenty of great broadcasting talents all over the place, and none of them get the chance because their last name isn't what it needs to be. Now, that's not an insult. Again, there's some great broadcasters that are heirs to legitimate legends that do great things, but they didn't blaze their own trail. They're kind of riding the coattails a little bit. Now, someone that I don't put into that scope as much as other people do is Joe Buck. I think Joe Buck over the years has gotten much better as a play-by-play broadcaster. He's taken it seriously. Someone who I may not necessarily like that fits that description I can't really name one off the top of my head right now because there's a lot. But another one who I think I don't put into that same realm is like a Jeremy Schaap, because I think he was very great. He was awesome on outside the lines. Plus, he was kind of in the same mold of his dad, but again, like, he had his own method of storytelling, very different from his dad's method of storytelling. So I think there's something in that. And if someone like me that actually like loves like the art of journalism, I think that's the best way to call it. It's an art. But of course, if you have people trying to be like William Randolph Hearst, trying to sell you bullshit, it doesn't mean anything. And I think with ESPN right now, it's going to be whoever the NBA talks to the most. It's whoever has those inside sources. And the thing is, with the way the NBA media was the last 10 years, with all the fake rumors and the smear stories, and of course, with now that we know that teams were leaking stories about certain teams being forced to trade certain players, I can tell you that most of the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum trade rumors were complete and utter bullshit. As someone that found ways on the interweb to get people that talked about the Celtics like they were never going to trade those two. So all the Anthony Davis talks, all that shit, I mean, Boston fans bought into it for 5 years. It's hysteria. It's how media works. So guys, we're on to, and of course, stay tuned, because the next topic is going to be Karl Anthony Towns. We're going to stay in the NBA because the Knicks made big moves and we got big talk.